Welcome to my channel. My name is Vlada and I completed my master's degree in Politecnico di Milano. My program is called Product Service System Design, and today I want to talk more about the application process because you asked me a lot of questions under my previous video about Polimi studies. So today I want to talk in detail about the documents, especially about the motivation letter and portfolio. Those two are the most important deal breakers in your application. And on this channel, I'm sharing day-to-day life in Italy with its challenges and nice moments, from cost of living and finding an apartment, studying and working, everything you want to know about day-to-day life in Italy. So if you're interested in this topic, please subscribe and let's start the video. And a little tip, if you are planning to go to study abroad, it's always better to broaden your choice and apply to various universities, so you have more chances to get into one. In my case, I didn't do that, and I applied only to Politecnico because I really fell in love with the program. But Politecnico gives you the opportunity to select the second option, so if you don't get to your first option, you still will be evaluated for another program that you choose. So choose carefully what is your first and second option. Under this video, I will leave the link on the university page with all the requirements if you're planning to apply for master's degree in Politecnico. I also have to say that my program was in English. I was studying design, so the requirements may vary depending on what you're studying, but mostly they are very similar to all the programs. And number one is university qualification. You need a bachelor's degree. You can also provide a diploma from specialist degree, which I did because in my university I studied 6 years and we had this specialist title that is something in the middle of master and bachelor, but it worked for me, so I think you can also provide this diploma without problems. Besides that, you'll also need to provide an academic transcript, which is basically a document listing all your courses, grades and hours from your previous university. The second document is course description. It's basically a short description of all the courses you took in your previous university. In my case, unfortunately, our university didn't have this, so basically I just had to create it from scratch, and I had to remember all the courses that I took during these 6 years of studies and what we learned there. And in the end, I made a document of 17 pages. I spent ridiculous amount of time doing it. And then if you are unlucky as me and you will have to do it from scratch, you will need to get a stamp from your university to prove that this is a real document. But actually, I think most of the universities already have it. You just need to come and ask for it. And sometimes these documents are super long. Like in the case of my husband, he had over 100 pages of course description. So it varies a lot from university to university. You also have to upload a cumulative GPA statement, which must include both your CGPA, percentage or weighted score or exams average, and the grading scale with the minimum passing grade in use at your university. And the document must be officially issued by your university. You can upload your bachelor's transcript or diploma if this information is provided there. The third document is your CV. Mine ended up being 2 pages, but I think it's better to fit everything in 1 page if you can. Include there your education, work experience if you have any, your hobbies, skills and personal interests. Because university want to know not only about your grades, but also about you as a person. Don't forget to mention all the languages you speak and volunteer projects you've participated in and any interesting activities you did. And try to make sure that your CV complements your motivation letter rather than repeating it. The fourth document is your recommendation letter. Even you might provide more than one. In case you are still studying, you can ask your professors or your thesis advisor, which is ideal. In my case, I was working in the moment, so I asked my current employer, and many times they will tell you, like, write it by yourself and I will just sign it and put my stamp. But in reality, at first it can seem like a nice opportunity to show yourself in a better light, but it should reflect your recommender's perspective rather than just being an echo of your motivation letter. And also the writing style should be different. So in the end, this task becomes harder when you are writing it for yourself. So try to ask your recommender to actually write you a recommendation letter. And one of the most important documents, apart from your portfolio, that really can make or break your application is motivation letter. And my advice would be to dedicate as much time as possible to it. Don't be afraid to rewrite multiple times. Start with a draft, read it, put it aside, and return to it with fresh eyes. I recommend keeping it to 1 page because imagine this poor admission committee that has to read hundreds of similar motivation letters. So yeah, short, engaging, and authentic letters, those would stand out the most. And honestly, before writing, I watched tons of videos and read articles to prepare. And my key takeaway from this is that your letter should be sincere and concise. Show that you are a real person and tell a personal story. Try to hook the reader in the first paragraph. And general advice for the motivation letter is avoiding being generic and avoiding using generic purposes. Like try to think what is different in your story. Try to connect it to your choices that led you to the decision to apply to this specific program and what you can bring to the table, to the class. Actually, I asked my classmates to share how they approached that, and we all had kind of the same logic about connecting it to your personal background. It could be your cultural background. Like maybe you decided to apply because there are some problems in your country that you are very familiar with and that you would like to help later to address, and this degree would really make a difference. Or maybe it's something personal. Like for example, in my case, I wrote about the experience working on a volunteer project in graphic design. We were helping schoolgirls in Ghana and how it shaped me and connected to my decision to apply to this master program. Your letter should show your motivation, personality, and your unique perspective. Also, don't leave it to the last minute because it's not easy to write at all and it has the biggest impact on your admission. And as I mentioned in the beginning, you can apply to 2 programs, so you have to write 2 motivation letters for each program. Don't forget that. So my first option was PSSD and my second option was communication design. The next document is language certificate. I took the IELTS and I scored 7, I think, which met the minimum requirements of Politecnico. And on the website of Politecnico, you can find the list of English tests you can take. It can be also TOEFL or other ones. And for IELTS, I prepared completely on my own. And if you're interested in this topic, let me know in the comments. I can make a separate video about my IELTS preparation. And finally, and most importantly, is our favorite, the portfolio. It's arguably the most critical document for master's programs in design. And for example, for engineering programs in Politecnico, you don't need to provide your portfolio. And my idea was also to make motivation letter complementing my portfolio. So I mentioned some of the projects I was working on in my motivation letter, and then I showcased them in the portfolio. Also, I tried to stick to the rule that less is more. Try keeping it concise and include only the best ones. I personally chose 5, one of which was my thesis project in my bachelor's degree. And before, I had a background in graphic design, so I didn't really know well what was service design. And what really helped me is to read about service design, about design thinking, and to understand what they might expect seeing my portfolio. General advice is to try to show more of your process rather than just the result. For example, I tried to share the behind the scenes and how I came to these design decisions. I shared my design process, sketches, target audience analysis, market research. Basically, all of this is demonstrating how you got to the final result. And in case you're having doubts about your portfolio and want some feedback, I know that websites like Dribbble or Behance or even just local design communities in your city might have these portfolio review events that you can participate and get comments about your portfolio. Maybe you will get some valuable feedback. And if in your portfolio you decide to share a project on which you worked in a team, it's always nice to put what your role was in it and maybe to connect your core capabilities that you described, for example, in your motivation letter, and then showcase them in your portfolio visually. And that's how you create this story about you that is being represented in these 3 main documents in your CV, which is like a summary of key events and key skills that you have, and then the motivation letter that describes your motivations and how you got to the point to apply to this master, and then the visual representation of it in your portfolio. So it's nice to have the coherent story in between of all of your application documents. And thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful for you. Don't forget to write your questions in the comments. I will definitely answer them. And subscribe to my channel. Also, if you have ideas for future topics of my videos, please let me know. And see you in the next video. Ciao!